Hey everybody, welcome back to Make Stuff Better. Today I've got a special treat. We are working on the Jada Toys Pixar Lightning McQueen RC car. What's cool about this is it's 24th scale, it's already radio controlled, and we're gonna just make it better. So this is the car and the radio, or the remote. It is all or nothing. You go and it's there, and you're either going or you're not. To turn the car on, it's just a switch down here, and then you move the radio and it's connected. That's as fast as it goes. There is a turbo button. I'll get some before and after footage, but right now we are gonna take this bad boy apart and see what we can stick inside of it. What I have to go in it are some electronics. This is an ESC, and that's a servo, and I am going to get a radio receiver, not a radio, but a receiver out of one of my other cars, because I don't seem to have one floating around, so that we can do this project. So I went looking for a bind plug for another receiver, and I found this receiver, which was actually the one I was looking for earlier. It is a Dumbo RC, and the G means it actually has a gyro built into it. So when this thing is fast enough to drift, we're going to have a gyro. This is going to be great. Now we're going to test the RPMs. Showing about 1800 RPMs. Now let's try it with the turbo button. So we're getting about 1800 RPMs without turbo. Hit the turbo button. About 2,400 RPMs. There it is. Not 2,400, 2,040. Before you put electronics away for a long time, you always want to remove the batteries. We're talking alkaline batteries. If you're using your RC cars, pull the LiPo out as soon as you're done. But with these will leak battery acid if they're left in there for too long, months, years. And since I don't plan on using this again ever, I don't want battery acid leaking all over it. So, yeah. This is not a battery tray. This is your charging cable tray. It's kind of cool. They're building the cars these days to just accept USB. The charging is built right into it. You just plug that in. I think that's a good idea for this level of car. Let's get these screws out and get the body off, see what we've got in here. And there we go. It was initially a little bit stuck. I think it was just these posts sticking in the holes. What's cool about this is that it's an adjustable frame chassis. Right here, this little red piece actually tells you where to stick the back end of the chassis, basically the motor and axle. And there's a little nub that sticks into a hole there, and this screws right into here, and it just works. So they just changed this out and changed the body, and obviously the wheels, because you're not going to have light year wheels on a Fast and the Furious car. And then you just keep using the same chassis for all your 24 scale stuff. That's kind of genius. There's a little wiggle there. Oh, we have these side clips. Pop those out. It's not too bad. You can see what's underneath. There's one in the front. Now we're free. And that's what we've got to deal with. So we've got the main board, fits perfectly right there. And then our steering, of course, is just a motor with some teeth on it. And that's how it steers, which is terrible. We're going to change that. I'm also going to hopefully get that steering angle to be a lot better. But I am going to have to take out that hole there, which is where the body sits. It locates into that, so I don't know if I'll have to figure out another way to put the body in there because I do not want to use this steering setup and have a steering angle that terrible. So there we go. There was one screw holding in the main board. This is the battery, so it's a 1 cell. I don't even know what size that is. If you pause it and zoom in, you could probably read and figure out, nope, that's just the patent. Anyway, what I'm gonna do is unsolder these 2 wires here. Actually, I'm not gonna unsolder them. I'm gonna clip them. So if ever I wanted to use the circuit board again, I know which are my motor wires and which ones are red and black. A little overkill, but does the trick. And now I just have to, oh, as usual, this is soldered onto here because they thread it through the frame and then tie a knot in it and then solder it. So I am going to unsolder that and then solder it back to the board so that this board and this remote just stay together. Put them in a baggie and put them away in case you ever need something like that again. Okay, I've got everything out that needs to come out, and I've already put on a JST plug that will hook up to my apparatus here. So what we have is the ESC, and this is the plug that goes into the rear motor, the drive motor, and then the ESC plugs into the receiver in channel 2. The steering servo goes into channel 1 because it's 1 to turn, 2 to burn, and then the battery plugs into the ESC over another JST plug because that's what the ESC already had. Turn that on. Sounds like everything's working. Turn on my radio. And that noise means we're in business. So the steering servo is working. Let's see what kind of RPM that's putting out. All right, we got it taped down. There we go. And test. So we are getting 36,000 RPMs now. It hit 36. It went down just a little bit. There it is. On 2S. That's pretty awesome. So we have effectively doubled our speed. Not the turbo speed, but the regular speed we've doubled, which makes sense. That was a 1S battery. This is a 2S battery. We have this connector used to be on the servo. I actually have a kit that allows me to crimp the little metal inserts onto the wires, and then it also has the plastic housing for the plug. So I'm able to make up these plugs. I didn't video it because it is, on wires this small, it's real hard. I'm sure there are a lot of videos on YouTube of how to do that. All of these white bits are from the old steering system. It's just one big piece of plastic. They used a gear to kind of go back and forth so the motor in front would turn and it would slide that gear across. And I was able to pull off of that. So I'm not using any of these anymore. There was a lot more to it. But I created, this is a steering link, and then this is the piece that goes onto the link that connects the wheels. I'm not sure what you call that, the steering rod, if that's a link. The other one's the steering rod. It's not really a rod though. And then this went over top of the old steering motor, which is, let me just get the car here and show you. So this went over top of it like that, so it captured the motor. And what we're gonna do is take the servo, put it in behind, and glue it, hot glue it to the top of this and on both sides. So then the servo is mounted in there really well, and it just fits. The other thing you see here are these 2 screws, and those came from a little kit that I have. Screws for the SCX24. And they're the Phillips head screws right over here because they were the smallest ones I could find. But this comes with body clips and bearings and wheel nuts. And this one I think is nuts that go on the end of these screws. And I've already used up all of the screws that were in there, but it comes with all of these. This is a 3D printed case that the guy sells. And I'll put a link to everything that I'm using in the description below, so check that out. And this is how it's going to look in the car. So this little piece here will get glued down to the steering rod. Like that. I don't know if I'll be able to film it, but that gets glued to there. And then we should be good. I'm going to use super glue for that. I've set the steering assembly off to the side to dry. Here's the receiver, which I took out of the case so that I have more space. If that's in there, I mean, you got this whole area here that's empty. So I can stick this down in there and have space for my ESC to just slide in on top of it. And I'm hoping this can go back on and it basically looks exactly like it does stock. I have got the battery in to fit in this compartment, so I had to cut away a bunch of stuff on top because the battery sticks up just a tiny bit beyond where the top of that was. And now it fits great. I also cut away a little bit here so that when you put the battery in, the wires have a place to go. And then when those come up through the top, see how they stick out a little bit beyond. So that's for those there. And then this balance port just goes in there. And you do have to finagle this part a little bit, and then that will close. This is a 450 milliamp Urgenix 2S LiPo that I use on my SCX24s. Link for that will also be below. The old on-off switch hole is right here. I had to do some cutting away right there because it just stuck up too high, and then the switch wouldn't protrude. That's the switch, by the way. Wouldn't protrude far enough for you to get to it. And then there were some supports in here that I used my flush cutters. If you don't have a pair of these, they are incredible for doing this stuff. You can see right there, there's a little bit of a support left, but this is what held the old battery. I was able to get it down to nothing on this side, which is perfect for the receiver. Sit right down in there. And I'm hoping with the receiver sitting in this orientation, the gyro still works properly. Just so you can see, I now have everything jammed into there. The receiver's on the bottom, and that's where you get these two connectors. Then the ESC goes on top of it, and all the wires are just jumbled in there. I'm gonna put a piece of tape over top of this so that I can install the steering setup, and then we can cap this and give it a shot. Just move the servo horn out of the way. My light's dying, it runs on batteries, and that's its warning to tell me that it's going dead. So, if it goes black, completely. You know why. There we go. Now I just need to get the cap on there without all of those wires exploding all over the place. I'm going to do that off camera. So that was shockingly easy. Those wires basically stayed exactly where I wanted them to. Now we plug the battery in here, and then we just push that up through here when we slide the battery in, and those battery wires will come up this way and through like that and just sit up here above it. So the car's together. It works, steering and throttle work. I am getting some binding in the steering right up here. This little screw I used is just poking out a little bit, and so it's hitting the frame, so I'm gonna have to pull that off, carve it out, give us a little more space. And I also need to take off that nub and that nub so that we get more steering angle, because you can see it hits right there, and I want a lot of steering angle out of this thing. All right, got that back together. Steering, still getting hung up on that same screw. Because I didn't trim it in the right spot. Well, it was the right spot, it just wasn't far enough. So after ample testing, I decided it needed magnetic body mounts for sure. And I've got a little magnet there, and there's a screw there. So I built, it's just literally a wedge of ABS plastic I cut out of a sheet that I have. And then I put a washer here, because a magnet to a magnet was just way too strong. So magnet to metal, and these posts in the back just slide in to where they would have gone originally, and it locks in. Not super strong, but this isn't a basher, it's an on-road car. So something that I also realized is that when I did that initial test, my dual rate was turned down to about 75%. So we're gonna see what kind of RPMs we get out of these wheels now. $39.7, $39.9, 17, that was from before. So I'm getting almost 4,000 RPMs. I actually did see 4,000 RPMs before I started recording, so, but just barely 4,000 RPM. So that's a far cry from 2,000 RPM with boost. So we actually did double the speed of Lightning McQueen here. The gyro on the inside is working. Initially it was going backwards, and the Dumbo RC receivers, you can adjust those gyros to reverse direction. The reason it was going backwards is because I had to reverse direction on the radio. So this was a really fun project, and I am going to be doing like a cinematic slow motion video on this once I can get some more steering angle and get it a little bit more stable. Because right now it drives good, but on a slippery floor, it just loops out way too quick because my steering, there's no angle. Look for that coming out in the next few days, maybe the next week, I'll get that out. It's not really a step-by-step guide on how to convert one of these. You totally can. And like I've said throughout the video, the links to everything I've used, even the car, I'm going to see if I can find a link for that. If I can, it'll be down below. But the servo, the ESC, the receiver and radio, all that stuff will be down below, batteries. And then I didn't use anything outside of the car. All those little plastic bits, I cut them from pieces that were already in the car. I did crimp on the motor plug, the JST, and the servo plug, which is your standard servo plug. I'll put links to those kits down below where you can find those if you're interested in getting a kit, because now I can basically do that as much as I want. I can convert, as long as I've got the ESC and the receiver and the servo, I can put plugs on things, all of that stuff. So thanks for watching. And this is just a reminder that you don't have to settle for what you get. You can make it better.